Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, on another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Glad to have you here. If you like what we're doing, please hit like and subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way. If you're a returning listener or subscriber or one of our very valued patrons, so glad to have you back. Now, I was told, I believe it should be going on this week, but we should be launching TIR on Means TV. That's right. Means TV will be carrying all of the video essays, past and upcoming, on their channel, as well as a few of our shows. They were like, we think we want to carry the sports show. I was like, do you know, it's just where we make dick jokes for like 3 hours. And tell really raunchy stories about our sex lives. And they were like, we're all for it. And I was like, all right. But if you would like to, if you're new and haven't seen any of the video essays or wondering where the hell all those video essays go, well, they're Means TV now. If you would like a 20% discount on a monthly subscription to Means TV, use discount code This is Revolution. I'll put it on the screen for you to see to make it that much easier. Where'd it go? Damn it. For a 20% off discount code, bam, This is Revolution. Also, we have something new for the patrons called the Crisis Papers. It is a kind of sort of twice a month thing that we're doing here. We're writing quality essays on a variety of topics. Issue number 4 is out now. It's called One of Us is the Killer. Dun, dun, dun. Celebrity cancel culture and the illusion of pop politics in neoliberal realism. And if you are a patron of the Teenage Anarchist tier or above, you get a special formatted version, but we put out the text version for everybody, trying to give as much to our patrons as possible as we are approaching the 1,000 patron mark. I don't know what that means in the grand scheme of things, but Toussaint would say that it's a really cool thing. We should celebrate it. I'm just excited that we have all these people that want to support what we do here on TIR. And today, we have a special holiday episode of This is Revolution Podcast. We're going to dive into the myths and truths surrounding the most propagandized narratives of American history. Yes, Thanksgiving is upon us, a time that can range from warm gatherings with loved ones to fiery debates with relatives, reveling in the glorious Trump victory over that communist Kamala Harris. But as we carve the turkey, we often forget, or perhaps never truly knew, the histories that make up this holiday and its complex intersections with the lives of Native Americans. Tonight, we take a sharp detour from the saccharine tales of pilgrims and Indians with our esteemed guest, historian Joe Payne, who will unpack the story of the Chumash Rebellion of 1824. It was a powerful and successful uprising against the oppressive mission system in Alta California, a narrative systematically erased by colonialism's historical whitewashing. Prepare for revelations that will enrich or weaponize your Thanksgiving dinner debates. Joe Payne will illuminate the Chumash as not as the savages that racist missionaries painted them to be, but as a sophisticated and resilient people forced into colonial servitude by Spanish Franciscans. Through their heroic uprising, they defied their oppressors and reclaimed their autonomy, even if only briefly. Tonight's episode promises an academic and gripping journey into this hidden history. Please welcome, coming all the way live from a place I formerly called home. It still has a very, very special place in my heart. And I look at this man as one of the few friends I have in real life. Please welcome Joe Payne.
Hey, hey,
There we
hey,
go.
there he
Hey,
is. How you doing, Jason?
hey, Joe. How are you?
Thanks for having me. That's a lot to live up to, man. I'm a grad student. I don't know if they get to call me a historian yet.
Oh well, you fucked up. You could just kept your mouth shut. Nobody would have
Ah,
known.
ew. Yeah.
Now, gotta keep your fucking pie hole shut. Here I am trying to talk you up so you can get on more shows, but you just want to fuck that up, huh?
Oh, I'd love to get on more shows. Yeah,
Well, you
I'm a
won't
historian.
now because you told
Fake it till you
everybody
make
that you're just kidding. Um, thank you
it.
for agreeing to come on. We've been talking about this for months,
For a
actually.
while. Good
And
timing. I like the timing we have for it.
well, when I'll be honest, man, I was not thinking about the holidays because the only holidays that I really give a shit about are like Christmas because I have children, and then their birthdays because I have
Yep.
children.
Yep.
Other
That's the
than
only thing
that,
that matters.
everything else is just not real.
Yeah.
And Thanksgiving, especially if you get to a certain age, if you're not really celebrating with family, even if you don't like the family, um, then you're probably having some stupid friendsgiving where someone's taking one of those crock pot dishes. There's just 5 crock pot dishes from people that can't cook.
Yeah, not me, man. I get down with cooking. So I literally practiced my green bean casserole the other night just to practice. I gotta
So
practice. I need a little practice.
are you doing you're not doing a friendsgiving?
No, we're going to LA to be with the family. We'll probably have a
Yeah.
Friendsgiving in some other time. But yeah, my friends, some of my friends can get down too. Not all of them are as talented. No offense to everybody, but yeah, that's
You can
okay.
offend them. It's okay. They should be offended. When they bought out that crock pot, you knew it was time to get offended.
If you're gonna break out a crock pot, you better know how to use it. That's all I gotta say about that. But
If I
and this story that we're talking about doesn't really. It's not necessarily Thanksgiving
no.
centric. But if we're gonna think about Thanksgiving, it's fun to talk about Indigenous resistance to colonialism. I would say.
Oh, I was having so much fun writing this fucking intro because I was just thinking about people fighting with their family members over like ideas of Thanksgiving and thinking about when I'm reading this and a lot of what you're writing about is kind of trying to counter many narratives that have been written about the Chumash over the years, especially some that are coming in from the religious side. And
Mhm.
I was like, oh, what a great way we can composite this to be the greatest conversation you can have at the Thanksgiving dinner table when most people are. There's going to be some tension in
Yeah,
2021.
yeah. I mean, and there's tension here in California. The history of the missions has been contentious for a bit. The canonization of Father Junipero Serra years ago by the Catholic Church. He was the Franciscan in charge of the um, the the California mission system, and so that was some years ago. Was that 2015 or 2014? I
Mhm.
can't remember. My recall as a Californian, my recall is always going to have some issues, if you know what I mean. But so I mean, I can. It's really interesting. I can break this down a few different ways, but the missions. As a Californian, they very easily just fall into the backdrop of being a Californian. If you grow up in this state, you have in the fourth grade, we have the mission project where it's going to be usually accompanied by some kind of field trip to a nearby mission, and they're scattered
Mhm.
all up and down the coast. And the mission project is for fourth graders. It doesn't get into the nitty gritty of colonialism, Spanish settler colonialism, but and everybody remembers the models, the little mission sugar cube models people would make. I remember by the time I graduated high school, kids were already doing their mission projects in Minecraft, which would surprisingly you could actually make some pretty interesting mission projects in Minecraft. I saw one kid who was able to break it down comes to a corral of cows, and he's like, the main material economy of the mission is in cattle production. I'm maybe inflating a little bit, but basically the Spanish mission system begins in the 1780s. This is a late incursion by the Spanish Empire of their Catholic mission system. In the 1780s, when they start the incursion up into California, this is already after more than 200 years of Spanish mission colonization in Central and South America. there's a deep history of that. But so a lot of what we see in the California missions is, we see it rhymes a lot with the mission system and how it spread across Central and South America, but it didn't begin until the 1780s. It was specifically under the auspices of this one order, the Franciscans, right,
Hmm.
by Serra. And there's a lot of interesting history that goes with this, and how and why that happened. But it's just good to contextualize. The missions are a latecomer into the Spanish colonial mission project. The Spanish crown was even more interested in secularizing the missions, meaning he didn't want to have to rely on priests that might have been more had more sympathies to Rome than they do to Spain as an empire, right? So help keep me on track as we go along here. I could lose my train of thought.
No, no, no. That's fine. We get
Well,
it.
because it's so complicated. But it's fascinating to know that violence and resistance, like violent resistance by indigenous people, always like completely coexistent with the missions. As long as the missions were around, and Spain was a European maritime empire, so these things hugged the coasts, they hugged waterways, they went up riverways in Central and South America, and you have patterns of indigenous resistance. From the outset, you have patterns of population loss from communicable diseases. You have patterns of the destabilization of traditional foodstuffs by the invasive species of plants and animals that Spaniards bring. And the California mission system begins again in the 1780s because Spain and the Spanish king is freaked out that Russia is starting to incur into what they see as their turf, the Spanish Empire. So they shoot all the way up along the coast. The first California mission is Mission San Diego, and then they get as far north as Monterey, San Francisco. Monterey will serve as like the capital, basically, of the Alta California. California, as we know it today, was Alta California, Baja California, Upper and Lower California.
Mhm.
Now, I still haven't even got to the Chumash. This isn't fair. I didn't start
That's
this.
okay. We need a
And
backstory. We need
yeah,
we need
yeah.
to understand context first. So this is totally fine. And I was going to ask you a contextual question. So
Where
you're
you at? I
you're
can't
you're
see you.
fine. I will shut you up when it's time to ask the serious question.
All right.
You're good.
Where are you
Keep
at?
going.
I can't see you. I can't see. Oh, okay.
I good. Good.
So yeah,
All
let's
about
talk
you and your
about
beard.
let's talk about the Chumash.
Mhm.
I grew up here. I live in Santa Maria, California. That's in northern Santa Barbara County, at the county line between Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties. These counties are named after the missions. You
So
were
do
gonna.
you think of yourself as being from Southern California?
We call ourselves Central Coast, baby. We're Central
Okay,
Coast, and
but you know who
it's
else
so
calls
dumb.
themselves Central Coast? People
Everybody,
that live 2 hours north of you
I'm
in like
sure.
Monterey.
Yes, they're
So
Central Coast because they're not. There's literally shirts around here that they just say two things: not LA and not the Bay, and it's just like, oh, come on, dude, who cares? Or
I
yeah, we made our phone code like 805, our area code
805,
remains
yeah.
not a thing. Yeah, yeah.
You have a
Don't
beer.
care. Yeah, yeah, well,
Yeah,
yeah.
you have a
That's the
beer.
Firestone Walker Brewery. Yes, yeah, 805. It's a whole thing. It's a brand.
You
That's like
don't
a
say
branding
hella
exercise.
there, and I feel like it's Southern California.
I mean,
And there's more Dodger
People
fans.
said hella growing up. There's a lot of Dodger fans here. The Central Coast is okay. The Central Coast is actually super interesting. So
It
let's
is.
talk about material economy. Let's talk about dialectical materialism in like the context of the Chumash. The Central Coast. If we were to look at a map of like the Santa Barbara area, that's where California corners, right? And that's Point Conception. There's also the mountain range, the San Rafael mountain range there. That is like part of what makes Santa Barbara so beautiful is this mountain range behind it.
Yes.
But that mountain range is a natural barrier between a lot of the ecosystems of northern and southern California, and they meet here. So California is one of the most ecologically diverse states, or areas of the North American continent. Then along here on the Central Coast, we have some of the greatest ecological diversity within this area because we have these two areas that are bumping up against each other. The Chumash are the indigenous people who the evidence of their living along the Central Coast. And if you don't know, Santa Barbara, if you're in LA and you're heading north on the 101, you're going to pass. You're going to go through down the grade after Thousand Oaks, and you're going to be in Oxnard, then Ventura. There's a mission in Ventura, San Buenaventura, and then you hug the coast and go along the coast. You're going to hit Santa Barbara. You're going to pass through that mountain pass at Gaviota, and nearby on either side of the 101 is going to be San Ynez. There's a mission San Ynez, and then mission La Purísima, and that's Lompoc area. So again, I'm trying to still talk about the Chumash, but it's good to know the Central Coast area. I'm in Santa Maria, that's North County. About a half hour north of me is Mission San Luis Obispo, where that mission is. The Chumash, but pre-contact, we're talking about thousands and tens of thousands of people who maintained linguistic, cultural, and trade ties across thousands of miles of coastline from Ventura all the way up through San Luis Obispo. They they thrived in the Santa Barbara Channel and on the Channel Islands. If you've, I don't know, Jason, if you can bring up any pictures of like Santa Barbara and the Channel Islands, but this is a beautiful part of California. It's called California's Riviera. If you've ever been there, I mean, my parents grew up there in the 80s. They got priced out, or my parents grew up there in the 60s and 70s. They got priced out in the 80s and came up here to North County. Some of the most powerful people live in Santa Barbara, and I mean that like on the planet. Some of those powerful people, the Royals live there, Oprah lives there, Reagan Ranch, Ronald Reagan lived in Santa Barbara. It's the home of movie stars and heads of state. And the Chumash were able to live in this channel for thousands of years. Some of the earliest human remains go back in North America. Before the Clovis discovery, they were on the Channel Islands 16,000 years ago. There's evidence of human activity on the Channel Islands. So, the first contact is in the 1500s along California with the Spaniards. But again, they don't really start their serious incursion until the 1780s. So think of how many thousands of years the Chumash lived along the coast here, and I can tell you, they lived along the coast. They lived inland. They maintained linguistic ties and trade ties across. Here's my young lady is here to join me. This is Estrella, a little star. She's the star of the show. But so the Chumash built plank canoes. These big, they're called tamoles, these very large plank canoes. There was asphalt that would bubble out of the rocks there, and they'd line their canoes with the asphalt to use it as lining. They did it in their basket weaving. So they maintained like 10 villages of like 200 each, or 20 villages, I believe, on Santa Cruz Island, which is the largest of the Channel Islands. It's incredible. They lived out of the ocean. They had a maritime culture. They had shell bead currency. You can go, they were climbing up into the mountains above Santa Barbara, painting these beautiful paintings you can go look at on the rocks. We can go way inland into the mountains, into what's today's Los Padres National Forest, and we find that there's archaeological sites of their villages and their encampments miles and miles inland, and they're loaded up with mussel shells and clam shells and the same bead currency. So they're maintaining trade across miles and miles of inland, across miles and miles of coastline. They lived in abundance, and it's interesting because when the Spaniards first encounter the first real like I said, excursion was in the 1500s, and but they didn't stay long because this was a boat excursion. So they popped along the coast and met a few people, and they were just loaded up with fish. They just had all this stuff to share with them, were interested in meeting them. But then later we have the Portola expedition, and we have the accounts of a Father Crespi, I believe is his name. And you've been along the coast, Jason. You know,
Mhm.
driving the 101 right around Santa Barbara. There's also the town Carpinteria. You've
Mhm.
heard Carpinteria. That's where my dad grew up. They call it Carpinteria because the Spaniards came along and there were Chumash out there building their carpenters building their canoes. Um, the part, hey, it's my wife, thanks baby. So we have these people living again for thousands of years. The Spaniards who encounter them, they definitely have their biases of that are present, but everywhere they go along the coast, Carpinteria and Santa Barbara, they just keep meeting village after village of people, and they're saying, each village has heard that they're approaching, and all they want to do is hang out with them and party and sing songs and play games and give them food. And they literally are given more fish every time they go to a town. They're given more fish, the Spaniards are, than they can carry, than they can deal with. And
Mhm.
so they're and it's interesting because the early historians, when you do historiography, the Chumash have been actually pretty well studied over the years, because who the hell doesn't want to spend time in Santa Barbara as a grad student or a professor? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me to do a lot of the stuff and we'll get to the revolution, the war, because we're on this is revolution, but like Mission Santa Barbara, that's still maintained by the Franciscans and by the Catholic Church. In fact, that's the archive of the library of all the documents I go to see. So if we start with this understanding of the Chumash having this very, even back then, the early historians would kind of, with their racist, chauvinist attitude, even then give the Chumash credit as being, they're so sophisticated. They're very
Mhm.
sophisticated. And all they really mean there, as Europeans especially, is that they have a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? They just had tons of stuff. And what it is when you look at Chumash material culture, they have tons of tools. They have stuff they made out of whale bones. They
Interesting.
have mortars and pestles. And if they weren't living out of the ocean, their main food source were acorns, live oak acorns. They fall to the ground. They go scoop them up. They mash it into a paste. We know most of the anthropology shows us that most of the caloric collection is done by women, and there was like a strong male maritime go out on the Santa Barbara. It's hard to navigate the Santa Barbara Channel, and they could do that. The people who lived on the Channel Islands and back and forth, but they would also hunt in the Channel. They would hunt porpoise. They would hunt other. Marine life, and gather. But acorns are super important. There's mortars and pestles. There's all kinds of fishing gear, hooks and nets, baskets for storing all this kind of stuff. Their homes were kind of thatched roofs. They had made sweat lodges. They would hang out in the sweat lodge for hours at a time. They had multiple gambling games. They had culture. They had a very dense culture. There's evidence in their grave sites that they were managing their grave sites, moving people around. Oh, I got to make room for this part of the family over here. They were burying some of their chieftains in their canoes, in these Tamal canoes.
Mhm.
There's one lady who wrote a book, Lynn Gamble, called I have it near her. It's like the Chumash at Contact, a culture of feasting, and we're basically, yeah, they had like a they'd get down like hobbits. They'd have a big feast, and party and all that kind of stuff. So when the Spaniards come, they meet this culture of abundance. They meet this people totally living in this way. Oh, they also encounter, this is one of our many historical accounts of transgendered women. There are transgendered women living among the Chumash, living socially as women, dressing and engaging in
Were there right wing
gendered activities.
Chumash as well that used the transgender thing to win Chumash elections?
No, that was the purview of the Franciscans. So basically, everybody freaking out about trans people today has the same, like, moral kind of view of the world, in my opinion, as
Mm.
some of these Franciscan missionaries from 300 years ago. They get here, and we get a lot of these cultural observations about the Chumash. They don't honor marriages. They don't, they're fornicating like crazy. Somebody does a dance where they defecate. Somebody does that. There's just, they're culturally they are shocked. Of course, they're always, but that's part of how Spanish colonialism viewed indigenous peoples as savages, as barbaros, as they would say in Espanol. They're barbarians. And their attitude was very much that these people are like children. Either they're dangerous barbarians or they're stupid little children, and we're here to teach them Christianity and show them the way, right? So the first missions are formed in California in late 1770s, early 1780s. Mission San Diego is one of the first. Within its first few years, it gets attacked. There's this huge attack where just one evening, hundreds of the indigenous people come over the hill. Ah! They set the thing on fire. They beat Father Jaime to death. I think they cut part of him off and shoved it in his mouth, if you know what I mean. Like, it was metal. Like, imagine me and Jason in the back with our electric guitars. It's metal as fuck, dude. And it's important to know that when the missions start, okay, they're dotted along the coast of California. They don't just exist on their own. The Franciscans are they don't just. There's movies that depict this, like a monk goes into the rainforest and sings a song with a lute or whatever, and all the people come and gather around him, all doe-eyed and everything. Right? That's part of this romanticization of Spanish colonialism and the mission system. The missions could not survive on their own. Nearby Mission San Diego was the Presidio, and in Santa Barbara we have a nearby Presidio. In Santa Cruz or in Monterey, which was the capital of the state government in Alta California, you have a Presidio. A Presidio is a fort. It's a military establishment. That's where the battalion is, the batallon. That's where your local kind of municipal authority is. Each mission has or not each mission has a Presidio nearby, but when they start forming new missions, Mission San Luis Obispo is formed before Santa Barbara. When Santa Barbara is formed, a Presidio is put there. They need a military nearby, and every mission has soldiers at the mission. And basically, the way the mission works, you have to get there, you have to build it. But the way the mission works is it has a church, but more importantly, it establishes it's basically a stagecoach stop, and it is an agricultural engine. It produces crops and it produces animal husbandry. So along with the missions, as these first ones that come, and again, they need to be there under military force for them to not get destroyed by the indigenous people, who rightly view, hey, these people showed up and now everybody's getting sick, and those military guys keep stealing our women, and Father Sarah, Juniper Sarah, has accounts of,
Do you say juniper or do you say
Junipera,
Junipero?
Serra, whatever. I don't know.
If you're from where I'm from, you say
Jules,
Junipero. If you're from where I'm
Junipero.
from,
Let's call him Jules, right?
Jules. Okay.
Yeah. So he has an account of military literally lassoing an indigenous woman and assaulting her, and that was commonplace. This was commonplace. So when the missions are established, a lot of indigenous people, if they most do not want to join the mission. They don't want to go to the mission. They're intrigued by the mission, and the missionaries did all these things to entice people to get them. They appealed to their material interests. It's interesting. In Santa Barbara, there's one scholarly article about a father who put out an order for like more than 1,000 sewing needles. And why would they need 1,000 sewing needles in Santa Barbara? And it was specifically because the Chumash had a shell bead currency, and they had an industry of stringing those shell beads onto a line and having, a beaded, having their beads on a string. And so they used those needles as a drill, and so that was a way they could bring the indigenous people to the mission. Now, a few things start happening. First of all, if you agree to enter the mission and become baptized?
Hmm.
Gotcha. They got you now. You
Yeah.
have become indentured to the mission. You're the missions are like a feudal institution. You're indentured serf now. You belong to the mission, and your labor is bonded to the mission. So, um, this is the thing, like in the historiography, there's debate on like, why did indigenous people go to the missions? Why weren't they all attacking the missions? There's one historian, I think it's Hackle, he's also cites there's indigenous activist historians like Edward Castillo and others. Castillo was at occupied Alcatraz, but they say, or Hackles looks at what indigenous people were going through, the biological onslaught, the the illness, the sickness that decimated indigenous populations, like into the 80 to the 90 percentile, right?
Now,
Like
some historians say that there was a drought that also took them out, and there's other ones that counter that the Chumash actually knew how to navigate droughts, as droughts had happened over the time that they've been around.
Yeah, so those scholars were trying to say that 1824 happened because, partially because of a drought. The
Mhm.
Chumash, again, survived in this area of California for thousands and thousands of years. This area is prone to drought. It has a Mediterranean climate. They had all kinds of ways of dealing with that. What happens when the missions, um, so the missions start with just a few, then they start to fill in. So here in our area, we had Mission Santa Barbara on the coast near Santa Barbara. And then after that, they formed over the mountain range Mission Santa Ynez, Mission La Purísima. This is where the rebellion actually happens in the constellation of these three missions. So, like, one mission begets another, begets another. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So they would kind of spread. Now, one mission could have as many as 10,000 heads of cattle on it, thousands of heads of sheep and goats and pigs. Now, as soon as those numbers start growing and the mission is at least having success with animal husbandry, all of those animals, there's no barbed wire, there's no fencing out here along these hills at the time. So all of those animals are roaming, and they're gobbling up every acorn that they find on the ground. They're completely disrupting the natural food scape of the Chumash. And then on top of that, all the Chumash are getting sick from these communicable diseases. And this is a pattern, again, that happens across Latin America, Central America. For whatever reason, this area has a more hospitable climate to, like, wine. We have like
Mhm.
the Central Coast wine country, like Sideways. Franciscans are making wine. They're also, but again, who's doing all the labor here? It's the indigenous people. So part of, like, when this rebellion gets going is like, who knows how to rig the horses? Who knows how
Would
to
you call this a
rope the
slave?
horses?
Would you call this a slave revolt?
So this is okay. So I've studied slave revolt. I've read with one of my teachers, and this is really interesting. There's a bunch of really good books about slave revolt. Read Tacky's Revolt. Read Blood on the River. That's about that's an amazing story about a slave revolt. Is Get out of here, cat. Is what was done to the indigenous people of California in the mission slavery? According to them, yes. According to some of the indigenous people I've heard talk, they say this is pretty much slavery. Were we chattel slavery? Were we commodified in the same way? No, not exactly. There were certain things about it, like, the Franciscans had a thing called paseo, where you basically had a pass, like you could
Mhm.
go off into the country and see the people who still lived in the villages up in the mountains, but you were expected to come back. So there are things that certain historians point at and they go, "That's not slavery. When do slaves ever get to have a pass, have a vacation?" You know what I mean? And so there's these other, that there's these narrow. I mean, but to me, it's part of
I
Spanish
mean,
colonialism. It's a feudal, like, was feudalism slavery?
it looks different. Like, we've talked about the enslaved Native Americans on this show
Yeah.
before, as people got very. I remember people got pretty angry in the chat, but it's
Yeah.
a thing that happened. It happened for a lot longer than people would like to assume it happened. It definitely is going to look extremely different in California than it's going to look, let's say, in the South, because you don't have cotton, for
Can I
example.
address something in the chat as well? The thing Prester John says about Benjamin Mattingly.
Okay.
Um, Benjamin Mattingly wrote a book called An American Genocide. So this is important. The genocide of Californian Indians that Mattingly writes about begins in 1850 when this becomes a United States state. Gold is discovered here in 49. Now you really know why it's going to become a U.S. state when gold's discovered here. And then with the United States comes Fremont and the military and, you know, and they massacre people, they slaughter people.
Mm.
Spanish colonialism didn't operate in this way. The missions, some historians like Edward Castillo, he's an indigenous activist, he says that the missions essentially were functionally genocidal. And the Spaniards were not committing genocide in that they were rounding people up and slaughtering them. They had all these other things that committed or that were functionally genocidal, concentrating the population in one place when they're dealing with infectious diseases. The Chumash had ways and means of dealing with that. They had fission and fusion. They would quarantine and go off on their own, and they weren't allowed to do that. By the missions. I mean, every night the Franciscans would lock all the women up in one place because the unmarried women, because you gotta protect them, and so they were concentrating them. Some, depending on how radical the historian is who's talking about this,
Mm-hmm.
missions are concentration camps. Missions are plantations with bells on them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Some look at the mission as a carceral institution, as some of California's first carceral institutions. This is very fascinating to me because, yeah, once you're bonded to the mission, they called it living under the bell. Like once you're under the bell, you belong to the mission. If you try to run away, they're going to send some of the soldiers out on horses to find you. Think of the architecture of a mission, the tower, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's just for a bell. That's just to ring the bell. Oh, is it like, or is it to
Site.
be able, like
Yeah.
Foucault, like, you know what I mean? It's part of the architecture of oppression, like how we keep our eyes on you. If you once you learn more about the Franciscans as an order, they maintain colleges, and that's part of what endeared them to the Spanish king. They're totally woke, these woke Franciscans with their colleges, but they basically maintain colleges here in the New World, where they have this whole system where if you're a novitiate, if you're new, like you literally live under the constant surveillance of the elders, right? And you're constantly like have to be behaving a certain way. You take vows. They take vows of silence, vows of chastity, vows of they're one of the mendicant orders, so they take vows of poverty. Everything they're doing is just to serve the mission, right? So like you have this is where it's weird. The Franciscans served a function for the Spanish crown. They would be they were true believers. They would go out into the wilderness. They would set up at this, wherever they were, and then they would, everybody who's in charge of a mission is from Spain. They're a peninsulare, right? So there's a system, a race class system in Spanish Latin America, the castas. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
literally a caste systems where you get terms like mestizo and mulatto and a bunch of other terms. But they come in, they go into an area, they establish themselves, they entice the indigenous population with material goods. Once you become baptized, well, then you're just stuck there. There's so much scholarship about all the different reasons why indigenous people did go to the missions. Everybody's dying. All our food sources are going away. Our magic isn't working. These guys, these wizards over here, somehow they're not dying from these diseases like we are. Like all these things come into play. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's the cultural reasons, but the material reasons are always there. Now, the missions that we're talking about, Santa Barbara, Santa Ynez, La Purísima. It's interesting. La Purísima today is a fun place to visit. It's actually a state historic park. The FDR administration, as part of the Great Works, turned it from a pile of rubble into this amazing place to visit now. Santa Ynez, maintained by the Catholic Church still. Santa Barbara, mission maintained by the Catholic Church. They actually maintained an archive and a library. The Franciscans still have a college there. Again, this is part of their tradition that goes back hundreds of years. The Chumash have been living in this area for thousands and thousands of years. Their populations diminish over the 1780s and the 1790s. They disappear from the Channel Islands. They're forcibly removed from the Channel Islands. Some people remember that there's a book called The Island of the Blue Dolphins. And that was
Yeah.
about, Juana
You all had to
Maria.
read that in school. Yeah.
Yeah, Juana Maria is buried at Mission Santa Barbara. I saw her grave not too long ago, and she was the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. She was out there all alone for years before the Spanish went and got her and brought her back, and she was dead within years from disease. In that case, so the Chumash have been concentrated onto these three missions. Santa Barbara, it's on the ocean facing side of this mountain range. On the other side, you have San Ynez. Again, today, like very wealthy people. That's where Neverland Ranch is like on that side of the mountains. And San Ynez, a bunch of celebrities living there. And then Lompoc is a bit more eastward, but again on the San Ynez side of those mountains, the San Rafael, I believe they're called. And each of these is like a day's earnest walk or an afternoon's horseback ride to each other. You have to go up and over the mountains. You have to take the pass if you're going to do Santa Barbara to San Ynez, or the opposite. But you have these three missions. This is really interesting. A few interesting things that happened in the years before. So this happens in 1824. Okay. This is the largest. Sorry, it's a lot of preamble. This is the largest indigenous uprising in California mission history, and it involves thousands of Chumash from across these three missions. Each mission might have had as many as 2,000 in population at the time, or a bit more, give or take. In 1810, around there, I believe. So about a decade or so before, there's a massive earthquake that rips through California. We're used to it. And it actually, Mission La Purísima gets completely destroyed, toppled over. And you can actually go to the old mission that's actually in the north part of town, and you can see this old pieces of the mission. It's like Lord of the Rings. It's just like crumbling blocks of nothing. It really is like, whoa, like, is this what the mission's like? What was like? But the first mission was destroyed. This massive earthquake happens. You can literally look up the hill and see the giant fissure in the hill. It toppled all the mission. Or it topped most of the mission. Then there's an aftershock that did most of the rest. And then massive rains like we've had in the last few years came through in a mudslide, just like went through the middle. If you were a believer, I don't know, like what clearer example you could have of like God's wrath or whatever, not being happy about it. But so that happens in like I can't remember, 1811, 1810. And they go, oh, bummer. Let's just build it again. And so they go to where the park is now, like miles up the river, and they just build a whole new mission. They just start all over again. And that's Mission La Purísima de Concepcion as we know it today. And so this is important for when the rebellion breaks out, because La Purísima is going to be the mission that the indigenous people hold on to. So a few things we can know about the mission. They claim that mission as their own. The missions, they had, again, hundreds of people. They had a labor regime, a forced labor regime, and these how do you enforce a labor regime? And when you have the comparisons with slavery, it gets interesting in that, you have to have field managers, right? You have to have a hierarchy even among the oppressed laborers. Within the missions, they had alcaldes, they were called, or they had a few different words for them, but basically you were like an elected chief liaison among the indigenous people, and you're like a liaison between them and the Franciscans.
A comprador.
Yeah. Now, a bunch of things happen in the early 1800s. There's that earthquake. There is epidemic. There is drought. But hugely, there's politics, and there's the first Mexican Revolution. Guadalupe Hidalgo, a radical Catholic priest, starts a peasants' revolt in 1810. And what's interesting to look at this uprising as like a revolution and a counter revolution is to know that Latin America and Mexico has a history of revolution and counter revolution, of an ebb and flow, a back and forth revolution met with a curtailing and a counter revolution. So there was this first Mexican War for Independence, and they throw off the Spanish crown. But within a few years, there's a counter revolution and a second monarchy, a local monarchy, the Iturbide monarchy begins, and there has to be a second Mexican War revolution, or there has to be another removal of him from power. And in the year that the Chumash rebel,
Mhm.
the Mexican government reforms as a secular republic, and not under this monarchy. And they're sending the missions, hey, you need to take an oath to this new government now that it's back. So the Chumash are starting this rebellion in the context of not just Mexico, but the Haitian Revolution, the French Revolution, the American. This is the age of revolution where there's all kinds of indigenous uprisings, nationalist uprisings, ethno-nationalist uprisings, all kind of stuff like that.
You kind of answered the question I was going to ask, but that's fine. I have more. Can you explain how the mission system functioned as a carceral and exploitive institution, using examples like the forced labor and punitive practices described in the primary accounts of Mission La Purisma?
Yeah,
How
yeah,
did
yeah.
these?
So again, to break it down, we have these three missions. There's a rebellion. Okay, there's a rebellion. Why does this rebellion happen? Again, the indigenous people are forced. They're the vaqueros. The vaqueros are, not all just Mexicans and Spaniards. They are indigenous people who are roping the horses and the cattle and the sheep and doing all the work and all the animal husbandry. They're harvesting the bushels of wheat and corn. They're growing, all these different goods. They're producing producing leather. Again, once you arrive at the mission and you agree to be baptized, you belong to the mission. If you're born on the mission and you're baptized there, you're bonded to it. You're like a serf. Your
Mm,
labor you belong to the mission. You're you're an indentured uh, servant the rest of your life to the mission system. And again, there is local military stationed at the missions to impose the Franciscans' will. Um, the Franciscans could be very punitive. Some of them could, there was like a good cop, bad cop thing going on sometimes, where they were trying to be the good guys, and we don't want to have to ask the military to beat you all again, you know. And so, if somebody ran away, they would go get them. They would go lasso them down and take them back. So there's a few sources that are oral history accounts of Chumash people who weren't alive at the time, but maybe their parents or their grandparents were, that were talked to in the early 20th century. But they don't. They have some of the details. The only other Chumash accounts we have from the rebellion are interrogations, literally like them being interrogated after the fact, by the Spaniards or by the Mexican authorities. So you have this forced labor regime. You also have the carceral nature of the missions. It's said that the whole thing began because it began in February, early February of 1824. That's 200 years ago this year, because a young boy from Mission La Purísima walked to Mission Santa Ynez and was there to visit somebody who was incarcerated. So he's going to like visit someone who's jailed at one mission from another, and he gets in a dispute with the soldier, the prison guard, and this prison guard beats the guy bloody.
Jesus.
Yeah, so just for giving him lip or whatever, you know what I mean? It's just
Mhm.
like it's a totally punitive situation in society. The indigenous people are under the thumb of this militancy all the time. That's their life, and they had been planning an uprising, and it said that's what a lot of the accounts say, the indigenous accounts, and that this has just sparked it in like early, basically. And so there is a huge fight there. The bows and arrows come out, and not sure if they actually killed anybody, any of the Spaniards, but several Chumash people die. They get shot. the Chumash set the mission on fire. It breaks out, and it all goes to shit at Santa Ynez very quickly. They start the soldier starts beating on this guy. Then within minutes, the soldier is, and his compatriots are shooting at crowds of Chumash who are staging an uprising. They're shooting bows and arrows at them. Things catch on fire. The Franciscans, of course, they like to focus on certain things like, oh, there were Indians who ran in the burning church to save the vestments or whatever. You know what I mean? They have the way they want to play it. It's interesting because the Franciscans, Spaniards, they want to blame the military. Because they're like, oh, this new secular government and this, they're conservatives, and this new liberal government, they don't like it, and it's not like the soldiers are woke or anything. Their opinion is these damn monks can't keep these savages in line. That's like their attitude, and so they're pointing fingers at each other. But you can learn a lot about what the indigenous people did or were doing through their interactions. So this happens at Santa Ynez. Within hours, people probably immediately just start running in either direction for either mission. Mission Santa Barbara has an uprising. They really don't hurt anybody. They let the main priests and soldiers go. They walk to the Presidio in Santa Barbara, come back with a battalion of soldiers. They have a shootout. There's a little back and forth, and they leave. They come back, and everybody, all the Chumash just left Mission Santa Barbara, and they go up into the mountains. They just head up into the mountains. People from Santa Ynez fled Santa Ynez, and they went up into the mountains. But so that was a lot of the older men, women, children. The young, fiery, ready to fight men, they head for La Purísima, which is, again, that mission that had been rebuilt within their living memory. In fact, one of the local elected indigenous leader, his name's Pacomio. He's a carpenter. He's like the best known carpenter. He's the leader of the rebellion in La Purísima. He's like one of the leaders. So they take hostage the father the Franciscan padre and the soldiers there at La Purísima. People coming from Santa Ynez bring in stuff they stole, guns, a couple of little small hand cannons, and they all they hold La Purísima. They let the soldiers go. They keep the priest as a hostage, and they hold it for almost a month. And to me, this is where we're like, and they basically say, this is ours now. We're going to live, we'll produce the food, and we'll do our own labor, and we'll live on our own. You know what I mean? They do kind of declare war on the Spaniard, and we're going to expel the Spaniard out of Alta California, out of our land, out of our area. This to me is where it's like a revolutionary war. It's not just a small uprising or skirmish. They put out the call to other missions, to local indigenous groups, north and south, and say, come join us. And there's all this paranoia among, the other missions nearby. But so that goes on at La Purísima. They hold it for a month. And then hundreds, thousands of people flee inland into the interior of California, near today what we know as Bakersfield. There was a big lake
Gross.
there. Totally gross. There was a big lake there. It's interesting because there's a big lake there, like Buena Vista, and it's a marshy, boggy, bugs and mosquitoes.
Oh no, your picture's gone, Joe. You kicked your camera.
Yeah. You can hear me though, right?
I can hear you. Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know why that happened. I think maybe I clicked something. I just tried to turn it back on, but give me a moment here.
That's fine. You can keep going.
Yeah, but where was I? Oh, well, okay. So they're fleeing inland,
as no one ever says.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Well, that's an interesting thing because they do escape. They head out that way to Bakersfield. They didn't call it that then. But this is very difficult for the Spaniards to like go out and get them. You know what I mean? Because they, like I have, some of the accounts of the soldiers who went out on this expedition, and they're like, Jesus Christ, they can live out here. Like they're eating all the stuff that's this is like a bog, this is a marsh. Studying slave revolt actually did this reminds me of something you see sometimes in slave revolts, which is like a what's sometimes called a maroon call.
Joe, now we can't hear you, Joe. That sucks. Your sound just went out right when you were getting good. How dare you? I think your cat did it, and that's what happens when men own cats.
Check.
Joe, where the fuck did you go? He said, I know the cat did it. That's why you don't have pets. They're more trouble than they're worth. There's so many stray dogs here. There's no need for me to have a pet. I just play with the strays. I keep dog bowls in my car, and if I ever I'm driving and I see a bunch of strays, I'll just pull over. Keep water in the back too. Pour some water out. Keep a little dog food back there sometimes. Feed them, talk to them, hang out. Sometimes they come with me on my run for a little bit. I don't have to walk them, and they're not in my house fucking shit up. Like Joe. Oh no. He's all the way gone because his cat totally did this. This is why I just don't have animals, man. If you're gonna have them, lock them up. Oh, looks like he's back. I'm just kidding about the animals. Can't hear you though.
Yeah. Check 1 2.
Now we hear you. Yes.
All right, we're back, baby. Sorry about
longest
that.
3 minutes ever.
Yeah, sorry about that. So as I was saying, you have this massive indigenous uprising across these 3 missions. You have these people who are isolated at, and removed from each other. There's exchange between these missions, but they're really coordinating together. They hold La Purísima for a month. It takes a battalion of soldiers who come down from Monterey, sent by the governor to put down the rebellion. There is a big battle at La Purísima. So here's an interesting idea, right? We talked about the missions as a carceral institution, right, Jason?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about we can mention Foucault and the prison and how prisons are built. There's a really interesting book by I have it right over here, by Susan Deeds, about Nueva Vizcaya, about how the church studied. It's all about how the church studied witchcraft, and she used the metaphor of the pyramid, like the Aztec pyramid, as the kind of the power structure in colonial Latin America, and how witchcraft in the minds of the priestly class or whatever, and the Inquisition, witchcraft inverted this hierarchy, right? So the pyramid is top down. That's very corporatized. Latin America, the way the church operates, the way the military operates, it's very top down. It all starts at the king, right? Part of why the Mexican Revolution happens is because Napoleon removes the king and political legitimacy disappears across continents, right? The top of the pyramid gets knocked out. So Susan Deeds talks about this pyramid of Foucault's social power, right? And it gets inverted by the idea of indigenous people and witchcraft. They can render, they can reclaim their power and kind of flip the power hierarchy. Here in the context of the Chumash rebellion, they take Mission La Purísima, and in the month that they have it, and they know that a battalion of soldiers is going to come. They know there's going to be a counter-revolution. So what do? They begin to fortify the mission. They begin to build up the mission to make it look more like the Presidio in Santa Barbara. They build fortifications. They build palisades along the side so they can, shoot over the walls. They cut gun holes in the bell tower so that they can shoot. I like the artwork that you used for the cover of this, but but it's also the idea of the tower, the tower, the panopticon, this authoritarian viewfinder is now inverted by the Chumash. They are at the top of the tower. They have mounted guns at the top of the tower. They are using it, for their own ability, or for their own means, and to reclaim, to autonomy, claim their own rights, basically. And there is an aspect of, in Latin American history, we have the idea of a junta. Now,
Mhm.
we hear that word and we get a little like uneasy, right? Ew, it sounds like the Cold War. It sounds like the Contras in Nicaragua and everywhere else, right? Chile. But in the early context of Latin, or in a lot of different contexts in Latin American history, a junta is a spontaneous form of political representation. If you're an indigenous person and you're given no ability to vote, or if you're in a class that's not allowed to vote, if you're in a racial group that's not allowed to vote, you can form a junta, and all of a sudden you have political representation, and your vote is your your
Well,
gun.
juntos just means together in Spanish anyway, so it makes
E-
sense. Yeah.
exactly. And so, yeah, so you have that political aspect of what's going on with the Chumash at La Purísima. But then you also have, what I find interesting, is you have thousands of people reverting back, using their ancestral knowledge and using their indigenous, knowledge and connections to flee the mission. So the people who flee inland, they meet up with Yokut people near Bakersfield, right? And they return to the land. I mean, they're living in this marshy area, and part of these interrogations we have is the Franciscans. What did they really care about? Hey, what happened when you guys weren't under the mission anymore? When you all came out here, were you all honoring your marriages? Were you doing the things you were supposed to be doing? Were you gambling? Were you doing? Yes, of course we did all. They did all those things, but more importantly, they went back to their they went back to their traditional life ways. And for some people, there's one article, a scholarly article, about how several people dug up their old canoes and rowed out to the Channel Islands during the rebellion. They knew that there was going to be violence, that there was this revolution happening, there was going to be counter-revolution. There were innocents killed on both sides. The Chumash at Purísima killed some passersby because they thought they might be spies, and then the local military just shot a couple kids out of a tree just because they had nothing to do with the rebellion. They were just indigenous and Chumash and nearby. So it was this very like disruptive thing, and a lot of people just that was their rebellion. It is kind of like self-emancipating, just removing themselves from this forced labor regime and economy that they were on. And so it's not until months later in the summer, after they've already put down the revolution, the revolt and the revolution at La Purísima, that the Franciscans and the military that were blaming each other this whole time, they go out there hand in hand to bring hundreds of people back. And they literally do like good cop, bad cop shit, where like Father Repul is like, "Man, you took all the best singers, man. Like, don't you know?
The
Like,
best singers.
I'm looking at literally, I'm looking at my soprano and my bass section over. That's my low and my high end, bro. Like, we got the Vespers coming up, and we can't sing it without Claudio and without Timmy and without like he's literally like making that. And then but then the Portilla, I think was the name of the generalissimo or whatever in charge of the expedition. He would just be like, I'm just gonna start shooting everybody unless we're out of here by tomorrow, and so like, again, good cop, bad cop. Hundreds of people, hundreds of Chumash fled inland from there. They went even deeper into the interior of the state. And I would even I think it's good, it's interesting or helpful to look at the ever since this moment, and maybe before it but also after it, from the end of the mission period in 1834. There's 10 years until the missions are secularized. They're no longer run by the Franciscans, and they still have, they grant some land to native people, but very little and not good land. And the labor regime continues for a bit after 1830, but by the time this becomes America and the United States takes over, the missions are kind of defunct and in disrepair already. And but then immediately after that, and in the decades following, Californios will start to write their own memoirs and their histories, and they romanticize the hell out of the missions, and they don't, they don't recognize them. They just think, oh, these God fearing Franciscans, they just really cared enough to really come out here and try to bring Jesus to all these unwashed heathens
Savages.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, this is the big question I wanted to ask you for
sure.
the wrap up, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And I don't think you're doing your show anymore, right?
I'm trying to get back on it. I would appreciate any of the subs that y'all could throw my way, but I do have a
Okay.
channel, Political Pain. I'm trying. I want to come back. I've just been slammed in this master's program. I've been planning to write about this for a master's thesis for years now. I'm hoping to actually do a couple interviews on my channel with Chumash descendants.
Mhm.
From these areas, and to talk about what this means to them, kind of like oral history, trying to feed my thesis actually as well. But there's I do have my channel. I'm trying to get back in it, but I've been busy as hell.
Well, how do you think the erasure of indigenous autonomy and labor contribute to the historical myth making around the missions as benevolent?
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, history, the way we study history, I mean, history is always interpretation, right? We're always,
Mhm.
no matter how you're engaging in history, that's an interpretive act. And so, I mean, we all, as Californians, we grew up with, I mean, the missions aren't just romanticized, they're like part of the backdrop.
Yeah.
They are beyond romanticized. They're like I live in the city of Santa Maria. Our city hall is built after a mission. It has a big tower. The city council chambers kind of look like a sanctuary. You know what I mean? So we celebrate. If you go to downtown Santa Barbara, everything's built in the Spanish style.
Hmm.
Spanish tile roof. Okay, you like ubiquitous, right? You look at Spanish tile roof, you see it everywhere. You don't think about it. The first Spanish tile roof came to California at Mission San Luis Obispo. Why? Because the native people set the thatched roof on fire. Spanish tile is counter-revolutionary architecture. It was
Mm.
a way of, of protecting the
Mm.
colonial institution, and that's what missions were. They were
Wow.
buildings that you were able to amass a political economy around. I think people understand it now. Like cattle. Cattle ranching has been huge in California for hundreds of years. Wine, again, like the first winemaking that was done on the Central Coast. It wasn't the wave of the 70s and 80s of Hollywood people coming out here making wine, like Fess Parker, the guy who played Davy Crockett famously. No, it was Franciscans and the missionaries. You know, it, I have in one of the sources like these, a Franciscan and the arguing with the military about like we have to get this done. We have to like return order to the missions. We have to bring all these people back. And he basically says, "You and I both know there wouldn't be a Spaniard or a Mexican who would eat in Alta California if it weren't for the labor of the Indian."
Ooh.
The whole thing is established. Spanish colonialism, the mission system had a thing called the encomiendas system, where if you owned a big ranch, a big plantation, you could go to the mission and rent people and their labor and just say, "Hey, I need a bunch of people to help me build
It's
this,"
like a
and
big
then
old fucking damn it, I can't think of the name of it. What's the place where you find the day laborers?
so the missions were stagecoach stops. They were like markets. Like I mean, there's so many. I've been in the archives a few times now, looking at the letters in between the missions, the letters to the civil authority back and forth. Huge things they're just talking about is stuff like, and one of it is manteca, fat, beef tallow. It's literally the grease in the wheels of this colonial machine. They're arguing. I can't spare any more manteca for you. I'm sorry. You got a bunch last time. I'll give you half a pint. I'll send half a pint here with Victoria or whatever. Like but that's all we can spare. We're having our own problems. They would have pandemics among the livestock too.
Mm.
So it's it's definitely so to me. I'm trying to bring attention to 1824 and the Chumash. Why? Because these missions are in some of the most picturesque, beautiful parts of California. You can learn a lot about the material culture of indigenous Californians, and especially these people, Chumash, who lived in abundance and thrived for thousands of years. And then you can learn how this was a great place to cultivate crops and great place and comfortable climate. Everybody want, I mean, even now at Mission Santa Barbara, to be the guy appointed to head the mission or the archive or whatever, that's a cushy job. People compete for that job. People want to be here. And I mean, I live in Santa Maria.
It's the most beautiful part of California. I've said this on the show before, and I'll say this again, and I'm not just saying it because you're here, but the
Thank you.
Central Coast of California is one of the most beautiful places in the world. You have
Yeah,
mountains on one side, you have the ocean on the other. The weather is pretty temperate.
cool all the
It never
time.
gets too
Nice and
hot.
cool. Nope.
We're never gonna get too like, I have acclimated to what I call Southern California weather. Sorry,
Yeah.
Joe. Well, I mean, I'm further south than you. It's probably like a 4 or 5 degree difference if
You're in
that.
Baja California. I'm in
I'm in
Alta
Baja.
California.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a little further south, but the weather is extremely similar. If you look up on your iPhone and see,
Yeah.
what the weather's like in Rosarito, I'm sure it's not gonna be
I
too much
mean,
different where you are.
if you're lucky enough like me to be born here, like why would you ever leave?
I
My
understand that now
you
with
know,
you
my
guys.
my
Yeah.
ancestors have actually been here in this area strip of the coast since it was Mexico. So like in the San Luis Obispo area, I have ancestors buried on the side of a mountain going back to like 1840, like
Wow.
about 20 some years after this. So when people get here, this is on my mom's side. So when people get here, they post up. And like it's hard. Nobody wants to leave. Yeah, they have Oprah's in Montecito. The Royals are living there. Bob Dylan. You know what I mean? Pick the
Michael
most.
Jackson lived there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Michael Jackson lived in San Ynez. Michael Jackson was tried in my city of
In Santa
Santa
Maria, I
Maria.
remember that,
Yeah,
yeah.
but I mean, Santa Maria as a valley is a massive agricultural valley. There's been oil extraction. Oh, Santa Barbara is beautiful, and the Santa Barbara Channel is beautiful. But there's oil derricks out there
Yep.
in the channel, and over the hills, behind me. There's hydraulic steam fracturing, oil extraction going on. Santa Maria also has an area called Orchid, which was named after a petroleum geologist named William Orchid, who helped G. Allen Hancock discover oil in La Brea. You might have heard, so like huge money, big money here, material. I mean, like agriculture alone is $1 billion per year in this county alone in Santa Barbara County, and then I mean, Santa Barbara is a destination um, for tourism, and just tons of money is there. It just sits there. Interestingly enough, the Biden administration declared a new sanctuary, a federal marine sanctuary that has been granted to the Chumash. So it's like the Chumash
Oh, wow.
National Marine Sanctuary off the coast here. That's like recent, and so stewardship is going to go over to like a consortium, a group of Chumash around here. We have one Chumash nation that's out here, and then several unrecognized, federally recognized groups or tribes. So,
And in
um,
closing, give you
yeah.
your hot take, moment of the evening. How does the mythology of Thanksgiving perpetuate a sanitized view of settler colonialism? And how can stories like the Chumash Rebellion challenge this narrative? If you had to propose a more accurate historical framing of Thanksgiving, what would it look like?
I mean, I feel like it's a cliche. I'm probably not schooling any of your audience, though. Who you never know. But the first Thanksgiving, as we know it, did not go the way most of us learned that it went. And the indigenous people that we learn about around Thanksgiving had a lot more autonomy, and and power even in relation to the Pilgrims, and they were very much helping those people out. Right, those people were desperate and starving, resorting to cannibalism, and the Jamestown settlers. Right, so you have to do a lot of unlearning if you just came up with the if you haven't ever read Lies My Teacher Told Me, or some revisionist history that attempts to correct some of our views about but I think most people, they get a bit older, they learn, okay, yes, there was definitely a genocide of Native Americans. We get in high school, we learn about the Trail of Tears, and etc. But in the California missions, and this story, I think, help us help us rethink a little bit of our history, because again, in California, mission history is particularly romanticized. Again, it's part of like the backdrop, it's part of our state curriculum. Kids grow up and they make little models of the missions. You asked me about the labor earlier. When I was a kid, I'd go on field trips, and there would be like retired white ladies pretending in character to be Chumash people working like an old loom, or some guy making candles or whatever, acting out how these people, the tasks that they would take out, not mentioning that this was forced labor, not mentioning the massive amounts of disease, not mentioning the resistance, all the forms of resistance. There wasn't just violent resistance to the missions. There was lots of different forms of resistance. But if we look at the mission, and again, the California missions start in the 1770s, 1780s, from the beginning, they're being attacked and there's violent resistance. All along the way, there are priests who are murdered or poisoned by the people at their missions. People run away. They just self-emancipate and leave to never return. There is all kinds of resistance to the missions. It was a forced labor regime. They also had insane religious control over their life. All these rules, that's something I didn't get into much, but the social rules that were imposed upon them, their way of life radically changed. New language that they're forced to learn, inculcated into the system. When you look at the Chumash Rebellion or the Chumash War, I call it a war because it spanned months and involved thousands of people mobilized at different levels. Even when they finally surrendered to come back, there was pomp and circumstance. They waved flags, they shot off ceremonial guns. So they were acting very much in the parlance of their times, expressing their autonomy, expressing their rights in terms that the Franciscans would understand, in terms of Christianity, in terms the Mexican government would understand, in terms of liberal rights, in terms that each other would understand, in terms of their own indigenous beliefs and magic, and their own material interests. We need to get the fuck out of here, man. This sucks. We're all dying here. Let's go live like we used to. Out near Buena Vista with our pals, the Yokut. I know we used to have some rivalries with them, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And them making real decisions. And again, the Chumash War is a revolution and a counter-revolution. So if us as Americans today want to understand, if on the this is revolution, we want to talk about the 50-year counter-revolution. Like, you have to understand how counter-revolution is a very potent and very repeatable, actionable thing and tool that's been utilized across colonial history, across the history of capitalism. And we can learn just some of the differences and the distinctions. The Spaniards didn't come out here to slaughter everybody. They came out here to pretty much enslave everybody, indenture them to the land. And yeah, they would intermarry and intermix with them and impose themselves, take native wives, and that served their material economy too. They needed to reproduce their own people, and that's where you have a lot of just like the different Spanish culture and Latin American culture, and I mean, the indigenous, when you look at Zapata, and the Zapatistas versus like the more liberal conservatives or liberals and conservatives in Mexico, like these follow along lines of race, indigenous versus mestizo, the material interests, who has the power and where and why, and then you see Native people navigating that. And again, they don't all do it the same way in the same place at the same time. But here in my neck of the woods in California, the Chumash went to war. They organized, and this I think could be a really good flashpoint to look at the mission period, because you got to learn, well, why would they rebel against us? How did it even work? And and from there it all just spins out, because there is a lot to it, but it is. And it's understandable. You can, if you've visited a mission, you can get to know, and you can get to know what it was like. And yeah, they were. They are a really important part of Spanish settler colonialism, and they shaped California. Our cities are named after them. And again, like incarceration, mass incarceration, and how people, their attitudes towards incarceration. What is this person out there wandering around, looking, what are they doing living out there in the riverbed or whatever? Lock those people up. I mean, the like these attitudes are still here, and the reactionary attitudes in California and incarceration in California. We have some of the biggest and biggest, best, most beautiful prisons in all of America right here.
And now you can do yoga in them.
Yeah. Yep. Try to dodge whoever the Golden State Killer on your way to yoga class.
Yeah, it's just I should look. I'm not gonna make jokes about that. I don't want to end up there. Joe, thank you so much for hanging out with us this evening. And
thank you for having me, Jason.
Hopefully I can because when I drive up north, I always take the 5. It's just the straightest shot. Every so often I get to take the 101. I will try to look you up so we can go hang out, because there is a
steakhouse.
There's not the steakhouse. Where's the place that I swear it only exists in the Central Coast in California? I think that's the only one that they have. It's the country breakfast place that only racist white people go to.
Cracker Barrel?
Yeah.
our Cracker Barrel closed. We lost our Cracker Barrel. Yeah. It's scandalous. Santa Maria is like the most populous city in between like Ventura and Salinas, and we are just pro development, like the rubber stamps heavy here in town. So they will build shit that will just flop, and that whole avenue,
that little strip mall thing is gone.
No, that's the thing. Just Cracker Barrel left, but Betaravia is the exit, and we call it the chicken strip because every chicken restaurant you can imagine exists on Betaravia. But Cracker Barrel couldn't compete with Golden Corral and I guess was it Popeyes?
Cracker Barrel's the shit, dude. You can get a side of grits there. You can't get grits anywhere else in the Central Coast.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure about that. I'll have to.
I'm pretty sure. You know what?
I could start a show that's just like Joe's Central Coast food.
Basically, Joe is like, especially his region. I lived further north. I lived in Pismo. You don't really know further north of you that well, do you?
I do somewhat. I mean, Pismo, I used to go there as a kid. Like, when you talk about the abundance of California, I remember being a small child at Pismo and like sitting on the beach and seeing bubbles in the sand and being able to dunk my hand into the sand and pull a clam out. Like, that's how fucking easy it was before the
Pismo is the only beach in the state that you can drive on.
That's at the Oceano Dunes. Yeah, they're about to put the kibosh on that. But that's been a local.
This is why people. You want to know why people vote for? I'm going to talk about this more in the Champagne.
I hate Gavin Newsom. I hate you, Gavin.
You want to know why people vote for Donald? I shit you not. I
can't drive our dune buggies on the damn dunes.
There's a thing. I'll leave you with this, and Joe can back me up on this.
Yeah.
There's a thing called Huck Jam. I'm assuming this doesn't happen anymore. And you can fucking get a beater and drive your beater off the dunes, off the sand dunes. You can ride on the sand dunes. People park on the beach, camp, right? All this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's businesses all around there, right? The little restaurants, right? There's all this stuff that caters to these people that want to come do, let's just be honest, redneck shit on the dunes.
Dude, people die out there all the time. We got an ambulance with big giant like big wheels to drive on the sand. I knew kids in high school who had like multiple knee surgeries. They had more knee surgeries than fucking football players. You know what I
from,
mean?
from
From
driving their bikes, motors.
yeah,
Look, it's a thing, right?
quads, drunk as fuck. Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's a thing. And
Yeah.
I remember being in this really cool spot, man. I can't remember the name of the cafe. I just remember the owner's name was Z. And we got into
The Rock and Roll Diner, was that the one in the old box car?
right there. You know who I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. We were he was bitching about the state shutting down driving on the beach.
Yep. Yeah, the Coastal Commission.
And I just started speaking about kind of, I see what you mean, but let's not throw away the baby with the bathwater when we hate the state. Ever since then, if I come into town, I have to go to his spot and say what's up.
Yeah, I see what
Because we had the big, like, across the room. Not yet. It's not yelling. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a fight. It was a conversation. But he was open to the conversation because he was so angry. And where most people's ire is always going to be the Democratic establishment, because there's something about the Democratic establishment. It's so buttoned up. It's so PMC, and they always want to do things the quote unquote right way. There's always these environmental protections. And we're talking about these just gas guzzling, diesel powered just trash on the
dude. Yeah,
right?
they've trashed the dunes. They kick up all this like dust into the nearby neighborhoods. Like sand just is blowing into the, there people have complained for years about it. They've been like it's been grandfathered for years. There haven't been, it's the only place in like the country you can do this. And it's like protected habitat, even like, somebody made a joke about a snowy plover getting crushed, but it's just one of those things where it's like it's always going to upset the people in that local economy because it's a huge draw to their economy. There are people who drive out here just to do that, and or people in California, if there's something you don't like, you just blame the Democrats and blame California. It's like housing insurance is super expensive. Well, why aren't you mad at insurance companies? Because they said the Democrats have too many regulations,
and it's just that simple.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where if you want to hear people yell about politics really loud somewhere, that's the most beautiful place in the world. Pull into that diner. Again, it's a great diner.
Bro,
you're right on the beach. You can just walk to the beach from the diner. You'll have a great conversation. You'll have a great meal. I love the Central Coast. I miss it.
California is not all one place. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of different people here. We have like redneck country areas. We got country folk. We got rural people.
Wasn't it you that told me what "Let's Go Brandon" means? Because I thought that when I came back to the Central Coast, I hadn't seen all this "Let's Go Brandon"
You're
shit.
Like, what's that? Yeah. We had Trump caravans. We had Trump flag caravans and stuff in our area. We got our MAGA people represent. Man.
I literally thought that Brandon was like one of those Make-A-Wish kids that was supposed to score a touchdown. Because what's that bar right on the corner when you get off the freeway to go to that 5 Cities exit to go to the beach right there? There's that bar, and it's called like Mongo's or something.
Yeah, not anymore, but yeah.
Okay, and they had the marquee, and the marquee said "Let's Go Brandon," and I saw those bumper stickers. I was like, man, this Brandon kid's really took the city by storm.
Yeah. I wonder what he did. Yeah, they really like this guy Brandon.
I thought he was like some crippled kid.
Oh my God!
Let's score a touchdown. And I believe it was you that was like, that's Joe Biden.
Yeah, I know that's a weird crypto way of saying fuck Joe Biden, which I don't know why you don't just say that. Yeah, man. I mean, I would love to get on here and talk California sometime with you because, like, I'm in Santa Maria and we're North County of Santa Barbara County, and we feel like the power of Santa Barbara here in North County. All that money. Like there's all kinds of capture of our politicians by the political machine that exists in Santa Barbara, but we see that regionally with Hollywood and the Bay. Like there's a brain drain on my town. Just like there's a brain drain in the center of the country for the coasts. You know what I mean? So these like regional things. Santa Maria is like the lower median age, so there's more families here. It's the lower median income.
It was one of the
Um,
most violent cities in the state for a while.
no, no, that's fake news. They do that all the
Yeah, it's
time.
fake
Don't do
news
that.
my ass. I was
Don't
looking at the
do
murder
that. Don't
rates.
do don't be like that. Yeah, no, I mean, we've struggled with violent crime. Our homicide rate's at the national average, has been for years. But we have street gangs. We're a city of more than 100,000 people. We do have, some street violence. We have some crime, but it's like it's no more or less than any other part of the rest of the country. The city gets a reputation. I go hard for my town. I love my town, but it's an
Yeah.
ag town. It's an ag town. Santa Barbara is where Julia Louis Dreyfus is cutting checks for the Democrats, and all kinds of rich, bougie people live there. But Santa Barbara is like majority Latino, majority workers. It's a bedroom community. There's farm workers here in town. I'm worried about what I mean, with the we have an ice facility in town. That's another thing. Our city council
There's we
approved an
we can
ice
do another
facility.
show. I think it would be a
It,
good show to do about,
yeah, yeah,
how people, especially locally to you, I'm even
yeah.
down to come up and we can maybe do it remotely, how
That'd
people
be fun.
locally to you are responding and even voting for Trump. There's a great article in ProPublica where they talk to a border town in Texas, and
Hmm.
they talk to the citizens who all not all, but a majority who are illegal, undocumented, voted where they're
I was
documented
gonna say,
children.
wait a second. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
they're documented. The illegals are voting for me.
There
Let's
was
get it.
one guy who was caught one Mexican national caught voting in 2020 illegally in California, and he was voting for Trump. But go on.
So, but yeah, so they were having their young family members who were documented citizens vote for Trump because they felt they were good. They didn't get in trouble with the law, and they weren't going to get snatched up. It's a
No,
it's a
no.
really interesting article. I think it's one
Yeah,
of those things people don't like to talk about because it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people that hang more on the liberal side of things and just assume everybody does the right thing.
it's not
Um,
uncomfortable if you know people who are
yeah,
naturalized who themselves. If you know those people in your life, if you've ever met someone who came here and is naturalized and is like, yeah, I got my fucking, we're done. That's enough. Like I know those
yeah.
people. And I mean, people have all kinds of different. I saw people. I know. Again, this is a majority Latino town, and I see people who support Trump for a variety of reasons, and some of it is as shallow
There's
as you could
cultural
think.
reasons. There's
There's,
cultural reasons
yeah,
why you would
yeah,
support someone like Donald Trump if you come from certain communities. We can talk more about that. Joe,
yeah, yeah.
go to bed. Tell your
Yes.
wife I said thank you.
Hey, my wife's also upset because she gets down in the kitchen just as good as I do. Everybody, I hope you have a happy food holiday. It's one of the great food holidays. We're gonna fuck it up. We're gonna make a bunch of really good stuff, and we're not gonna celebrate any kind of bullshit togetherness that is all just just an American mind game that does. We're very divided. Don't kid yourself. But let's just all eat too much and have a good time.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for hanging out with me, and I will hopefully see you sooner than later. That is Joe Payne. That's his name. Wherever you are watching this show, Sune, the great moderator of this channel, one of the great moderators of this channel, put a link to Joe's channel. Give him a solidarity subscription, please. I think went on Joe's show maybe like 3-4 years ago. Miss that guy. He's a great ambassador for his region and his show because he actually was a local journalist. He did a lot of interesting local journalism. Like I remember one time he covered the propaganda footage that the cops were putting out post the George Floyd era, which was really funny because I do want to talk about how there's a shift. There's a cultural shift. And what does Puffy have to do with it? Oh, this might be interesting. But we're going to go to the champagne room, hang out with you guys for a little bit. God forbid people feel togetherness, says New Yank. I want to read a few comments that you guys left, and then we'll go. Virtuoso with the super chat. Thank you so very much. Thank the Native Americans by giving them their land back. Ooh. We coming for you, nigga. Damn, you really going for it, Virtuoso. Who made the potato? I mean carrot raisin salad. Fuck you. I told you it's just for me. I don't share that with anyone. Can't just get the carrot raisin salad. Do a land acknowledgement instead of saying what you're thankful for. That would be funny. If you guys, I wish there was something, if you can think of something that I could I almost set myself up to get fucked up by you guys. I'm gonna say something I could give you. Um, something that you would want from TIR. If you make a video of yourself doing a land acknowledgement at Thanksgiving, and I could put a compilation of them together, I will put that shit up. I'll blur out your family's faces if you want. I'm not a piece of shit like that. But that's like my dream come true, to be able to make a compilation of people doing land acknowledgements during Thanksgiving. And then getting like the comments from the crazy old grandpa. It's mildly racist, but has a black friend. Mount Diablo is named for the indigenous resistance fighters ambushing the Spaniards in the rushes like devils. Fuck yeah. That's in the Bay Area, as Bay Planner said. Tanja Marshall, thank you so much for telling why California is so beautiful. I know it is, and I've been feeling real homesick. So we're gonna talk some hip hop and Puffy and cultural shifts in the Champagne Room. We still treat Native folks that way, either the myth of the savage or the myths of the noble savage. Very true, Tony. Very true. Tony, back that up with, we moderns grossly underestimate this. Spaniards, when they didn't want gold and silver or unfree labor, really did also want souls. It's dark. It's true and it's dark. Joe, was there a chance for them to try the Xanatization like during the Pueblo Revolt? You guys are asking Joe some deep questions. You got to hit him up on his channel and ask him questions there. And what effect did the Argentinian privateers taking of Monterey Presidio for a month have in weakening the Spaniards in Alta California? Thank you guys so much. Again, TIR, smartest viewers. Sophia Memorial in the Champagne Room? Of course, that's what I'm talking about. I've been watching way too many Sophia videos. I hit up MT today. I think she was super busy, and I was like, I think we should do a show. I'm going to start doing a series. Probably not going to be able to get done this year, but it's probably going to start next year, called The Golden Era. It's going to be on Pop Life, and it's going to be about the golden era of hip hop and take different things that happened in the golden era. Look at different albums. I'm really loving this greatest year of music thing, and then dissecting certain years. Was on the phone with a friend the other night. We're going to dissect the year of heavy metal 1987, but I also want to like look at the golden era. It's going to be like 30 years. 1995. It's 30 years since 94. We talked about 94 and all the great albums that came out in 94. We also talked about 1993 and all the great albums that came out in 1993. Let's dissect some of these albums, some of these moments. And one of these moments I would love to talk with you guys about is the Hyro Hobo battle, that I think is a very, very important moment in hip hop. And let's juxtapose it to Kendrick and Drake. Doesn't that sound fun? It sounds like fun to me. D Cypher says Jurassic. All of a sudden, now all the rappers come out. D Cypher says, "What's golden?" Jurassic 5. I remember I couldn't go to the show for some reason. I think I had to actually work. And Coach Will, who you guys have met, and another friend of ours who's never been on the show, probably won't come on the show, came back from a show, one of the Mystic Journeyman shows. Now they're known as Living Legends. And they had this tape of Jurassic 5, and it was a drawn cover. I think Coach Will still has a lot of his tapes that we bought and stuff that we sold on the street with like drawn covers. So we heard Jurassic 5 hella long ago, and we were like, this is the coolest shit in the world. So we can talk about all that fun stuff. I'm going to try to bring some of these guys on. I've been talking about doing shows on the golden age of metalcore. I actually got guys from that era that want to come on and talk about that too. So more fun stuff. Definitely going to do the hard hitting political and history stuff, because just got to do it. It's in my blood. But yeah, see, sing that New Edition song, Jason. Oh, that was fun. Okay, thank you guys so much, and we are out.